Okay.
Hi, Emma. It's so amazing to have you here. I'm just going to go ahead and ask you a couple questions about your journey, your background, and advice you have to other women or gender minorities hoping to pursue the aerospace field. So, to start off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your first inspiration to the space industry?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to get to share another story of how you can end up in the space industry. There are so many different pathways into this incredible industry, and I think sharing the different ways are so important and finding what resonates in the stories of different people to be able to start to craft your own story is really important. My story started when I was very little. My dad was a big fan of NASA and would let me spend some time on the NASA website when I was little. It was the only website that I was allowed to play on. And this was back in like when the computers were like the size of a big box. And I can remember it moving super slowly, but I loved NASA's website because it was full of all these fun games where you got to fill a rocket with supplies. And if you packed it right, it would launch to Mars. Or you would try and figure out there was one about like where aliens could be in the solar system. And they were just the most fun ways to imagine what worlds beyond our own could look like. And as part of that, I was on NASA's website and able to watch when they released the footage of the rovers Spirit and Opportunity landing on Mars. At the time, I was about 4 years old, 6 years old, 4 years old. I was about, let's do the math here. I was about 6 years old. And I loved those little rovers. They bounced down in like this bubble wrap packaging kind of vibe and would like bounce onto the surface of Mars. And then the packaging would open up and they'd roll off and go do their thing. And I was obsessed with those rovers. I made Play-Doh versions of them. I made Lego versions of them. I just thought it was the coolest thing that we were sending these missions to other planets to try and learn more about our own place in the universe. Um, but I didn't think about myself as a scientist or an engineer. My mom always wrote down what I said I wanted to do at the start of each school year. And if you go back to those years, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a dancer. There was one year where I wanted to be like a circus trapeze artist. So absolutely nothing related to science. Um, while I had that love for space exploration, it never like really occurred to me that I was a field that I could pursue as a job. So fast forward a little bit, when I was in eighth grade, our school had us do 4 quarters of different sciences. We did ecology, we did biology, we did chemistry, we did physics. Ecology was fine, didn't love biology. Chemistry was cool, but physics was amazing. I loved being able to use math to understand how the universe worked. And my amazing science teacher, shout out to Miss Dewis, she said, Emma, you can combine this love for physics with your love for space and study this field called astrophysics. So that led me down a path of consuming every book that I possibly could about astrophysics. I'm a big library girl and a big reader in general. So I read all the popular science books that I could to learn about what was going on in this field and completely fell in love. I then ended up doing a program called the Summer Science Program, which I'm still a huge advocate for. It's a program where you spend 5.5 weeks in the summer between your junior and senior years of high school at a campus somewhere around the country doing the math, physics, and coding necessary to be able to determine the orbit of an asteroid whose data you're collecting from a telescope every night. And now the program has expanded, has genomics, they have biophysics, and they're building out. So the summer science program is applicable to so many different interests in science now too, which is really cool. But that program was the first place where I was doing real science. And not only was I doing it, but I had people who said, look, you're doing this, you are capable of this. And it made me realize that I could think about actually doing this as a major in college and beyond. I again, as part of that core that program, had someone say like, "Hey, look, have you ever thought of these schools like Princeton or Harvard, places that I just hadn't even considered possibly applying to?" And all of a sudden, they were something that I was thinking maybe I have a shot. So I ended up setting my heart on Princeton and was lucky enough to get in there and just loved my program there. The astrophysics department was amazing, and getting to walk in the footsteps of some incredible women in astronomy who walked those hallways was something that I will never ever take for granted. Um, During that time, I really fell in love not only with the astrophysics side, but with what was going on in the space industry. I was a Brooke Owens fellow, and I got to work at Bryce Tech and see all this cool stuff that was happening in the space industry. And came back to my department and said, look at all this. And there was crickets. People were saying, what? Like, it's like there's SpaceX, there's Blue Origin, but like, why do we really care? And so excuse me, back at that point, I said, okay, my goal is to bridge the astrophysics world and the space industry world and to work at that intersection. And that's been my driver since. Um, I, at the end of undergrad, when I was deciding what to do, I debated between doing actually law or a PhD in astrophysics. I'm really interested in space policy, still am, and considering the degree in law was a reflection of that. Ultimately, I decided to do research, and I've loved getting my PhD in exoplanet science. It's so fun to get to study all these systems that are so far away from us and look so different, and that bring us back to understanding why we should care about our own planet. And through that, I've continued a whole bunch of other activities in the space industry. That was the very long-winded version of the story. I'm happy to expand on more details and talk about the journey, but that's how I got here today.
That's such an incredible and inspiring story. And I have a couple questions to go based off of that. So, you were such an inspiring figure during AIAA with like your Y Space panel and Astro debates, which was so amazingly organized and a very stimulating talk to listen to. Like usually when you think of conference sessions or like technical sessions, sometimes, you just come in and you feel like you're falling asleep. But that's like one of those conference sessions that I will remember like forever. So can you talk a little bit about how you sort of stepped out of like your work in just astrophysics and math and science and like got into public speaking and like, got into having all these sort of outreach initiatives. And you also mentioned your interest in space policy and how you sort of made space an all-rounded interdisciplinary love and was able to pursue that.
Yeah, that's a really important question because it can be so easy to feel really siloed or to feel forced into a particular box. And one of my favorite quotes, I don't remember who said it, but it's basically don't put yourself in a box because the world's going to try and do that for you. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is just do whatever you want to do, and you'll figure out what that path is going to look like eventually. Like what you're actually going to name it or something down the line. So for me, all those things that you mentioned were a reflection of just saying yes to opportunities that sounded really exciting to me, and a combination of that with a desire to give back. I had a lot of really important mentors in my life, and they are why I'm able to be here today. And I want to give back to the next generation and make sure that we like hold the door open behind us, and make sure that people can continue to flood through and the door gets bigger. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's why the like outreach is so important to me. And then the public speaking side of it is tied to that. I think it's really important to have good scientists communicating why science matters to the world, not just what the science is. And actually, AIAA was how I reminded myself that I love to do that, because I was one of the D12 speakers. Gosh, that was in 2021 or 2022. And I remember being on that stage at Ascend and remembering, wow, like I do love to tell the story of space. I used to do it all the time in high school. It was my debate topic was why we should fund NASA more. It was what I gave my oratory on. And when I was a little kid, I was like a little more outgoing and like performer vibes. I loved, like I said, dancing, things like that. And then went to college and kind of felt like that spirit got beaten out of me because it was just so much academics all the time. Um, so in grad school, I've made a real attempts to reconnect with that. I do a lot of outreach work. I do a lot of outreach talks. I have been working on a children's book to try and reconnect to the creative side and think about what are other ways we can engage kids in science. And doing it all through a lens of how does space relate to our world right now. Um, but it's just been a say yes to the things that light you up, say no to the things that don't, and don't worry about whether you fit into a box that somebody else is already in.
I love that. And good luck on your journey with coming to publish your children's book. I saw all your Instagram stories. I'm very excited to like it come out and see it. That's so awesome. What are some of like you talked a lot about, you said you love books and reading. What are some of your book recs?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So that whole bookshelf behind me is like all science books, and it's one of
That's so
like three
awesome.
bookshelves in my apartment. I keep some of my favorites right here, actually. Let me grab them. Um, the one that I'm thinking of. So I love this book. It's called The Space Telescope, and it's
Ooh,
this history of how the Hubble Space Telescope came to be, but from a policy perspective. Um,
nice.
which is really fun for me because I think it's really
Yeah.
cool to see how these missions came to be because it's the people who make it
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Um, I also love all of Carl Sagan's work. I think it's just some of the best science communication ever done. And
Yeah.
his Pale Blue Dot book is one of the things that has inspired me most consistently in my life.
Yeah.
Um, so that one's definitely a classic. And then um, let's see, I don't have it right here. But there's a book about Vera Rubin and her discovery of dark matter that is one of my absolute favorites to read too, and to just understand that story.
That's awesome. Talking about your journey, like, especially as like women or gender minorities in this industry, there are so many challenges that we face, like whether it's like more of a day-to-day thing or like certain periods where you're just like fully bogged down, or like you said, you have your energy beaten out of you. What were some of the most helpful resources that you think help you overall or help you the most in terms of overcoming like challenges? You mentioned the Brooke Owens Fellowship, which I think everyone eligible should apply to, but any other resources or opportunities that you think sort of helped you get to where you are?
Yeah, so I think to expand a little bit more on what I meant with the energy beaten out of me in undergrad, which very much relates to this, is the academic program was really intense and I ended up extremely stressed. And by the end of college, I had anxiety and I was having panic attacks before exams. And it was just an unsustainable way to keep going. And I totally disconnected from why I loved what I was doing in the first place. So for me, what helped me in those moments was a combination of learning personal development tools, learning how to meditate, learning how to bucket my time, how to connect what I'm doing to my bigger dreams. Those very practical tools that I can apply every day, no matter how that day is going, that ground me. Also a big fan of any tools that can help everybody understand themselves better and how they interact with the world. Being aware of how we engage with the world is really important, also how we interpret it. Um, Other resources, community, like you said, the Brooke Owens Fellowship has been an amazing community for me. Finding other women in STEM in my programs has been an important part of community. People who you can go and laugh with, but also cry with, get advice from, and have that peer mentorship to build a successful future for all of you because competition happens at the bottom and collaboration happens at the top. Like we got to have each other's
Yeah,
backs.
I love
Um,
that advice. Yeah.
yeah.
And to wrap this up, my last question is right now you're pursuing your PhD at Yale. What do you think your next steps of the journey are going to look like, and how is your PhD coming along?
Yeah, so I'm currently in my fifth year of my PhD program, which makes me feel a little bit old. I will be graduating next spring and was actually working today on the plan for dissertation writing and making sure that everything is ready to go out the door to readers and be defended in the spring. Not sure where I will end up yet next or next yet because I'm still in the midst of applications. So check back with me in April and I'll be able to tell you. But I can tell you that everything that I do will always be aligned with that goal of using space for the betterment of Earth and to increase scientifically informed decisions and to engage the public with this amazing feat of exploration that we're doing. So in some way, shape, or form, it will be building systems that enable that to happen.
Good luck on all of that. And you have really big goals that help the world and make space collaborative. So I love what you do. And yeah, good luck on everything. Thank you so much for your time, Emma.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Priya.